Also, this is a Zen master, the ultimate mentor. I do believe you need somebody that you can talk to, like relate, for instance. I mean, at one time, I had a contract with an organization that I would give up to 20 days a year of my time to them, if needed, and they would pay me a retainer for 20 days to be used by any member of the organization above a certain level. They were rather elitist, who wanted to talk about any kind of problem secretly and confidentially with me. Not necessarily a relationship problem, might be about their career, might be about their problems with the boss, might be about their family or whatever. But they could come to me without anybody knowing, and the firm would have paid. I wouldn't know who had been and who hadn't been, and they never asked me. Now, it seems to me that that was a very valuable thing for the organization to do. Not saying that I was very valuable, but somebody like me that they could actually. Now, why wouldn't it be sensible for organizations to have a similar contract with Relate? That anybody could go and use Relate services without anybody knowing, but paid for by the organization. Somebody that they could talk to. A lot of organizations have mentoring schemes, but so often those are related only to the problems at work. And of course, as I was saying, and you will understand, the problems of work and home are totally interrelated. So why shouldn't we create a mechanism? And there's an organization here ready and waiting to be able to do that sort of thing. I do commend it to you. Now, life moves on from this second age of responsibility, exhaustion, and all the cares of child rearing and family management and so on, into the next stage. And at this stage, you have to take care of the Sigmoid Curve. If you haven't met the Sigmoid Curve, well, please take note. This is the curve of everything that happens in the world. Let's start with a product. A product, you put money into it at first, you invest in it, and then that's the dip, and then it grows, and then eventually it outwears its usefulness, and it dies down. But it also applies to organizations which have their beginnings and success, and then decline. It always amazed me that business organizations used to offer people lifetime contracts, and the average life of an organization in business in those days was maximum 40 years. And yet there, halfway through that, they were offering lifetime contracts. And all the statistics showed that they wouldn't be around at the end of your life. But they did, because they didn't understand the Sigmoid Curve. And it applies, of course, to your life. The dip is for education and investment in the first phase. And then you are successful in one way or another. And you grow, and you develop, and then you go down. And that's very sad. And if I asked you to put your across where you are in that curve now, it would be a sad thing for some of you to do, perhaps, but exciting for others. I used to have fun with organizations asking people where they put the organization on that curve, and of course, the senior managers put it halfway up. And a lot of the people at the bottom put it halfway down, and then I couldn't present them with the findings. But it's not as depressing as it sounds, because there is a second curve and then a third curve. You've got to reinvent yourself. The trick is that you've got to start the second curve before the first curve peaks. Because otherwise you don't have the resources and the time to cover the dip. Because you see, when it crosses the first line, that's when it's level. At that period, I've discovered on average is before it crosses again is about 2 years. So actually you have to start changing just at the moment when you think you've got everything sorted and you're doing very well indeed. But that's the time, and you should be thinking of changing. Now I'm saying that as you enter the third phase of maturity, which statistically would run from 60 to 90, but in some cases a little later, in some cases a little earlier. A lot of people are leaving or being pushed out of organizations in their mid-50s. But rather than be pushed, develop your second curve. You have 2 years to do it in before you're on the downward path, and it's not so easy to recover. And so if you're thinking you're high and dry and doing well, think about the second curve, because at that time you really have to reorganize your life. And people do. I mean, this is a book we wrote about reinvented lives, women at 60 who had totally changed their lives. This woman who had built up 6 children, and as they were growing up and reaching their end of their teens, she turned herself into a conference organizer and a garden designer and won a prize at the Chelsea Flower Show. So you can totally change your life if you want to. Otherwise, this woman married, and she discovered eventually to an alcoholic husband. In the end, she divorced him and had another marriage, which is very happy indeed. Now, I'm not an advocate of divorce, but sometimes at the last stage, it may be very nice to change partners, and I wouldn't say that was a terrible thing to do if your first marriage has been a total disaster. You can reinvent your lives. These women, we collected 29 of them, and they all reinvented their lives at 60. The only problem is a lot of men don't do that. They pomble along, accepting board directorships and things like that, which is much the same as they were doing before, or else they go on endless cruises or whatever, but they don't reinvent their lives. Now, I hope they will do in future, because they'll need to. Because in this final, age of maturity, you will have to have work. You will have to have love, relationships of one sort or another, perhaps more friendship than deep romantic things. I think true marriages end up as a marriage of friends. And you will have to go on learning. Because if you're not learning, you're not growing. It doesn't mean you have to go back to college. But it does mean you have to, learn more about opera, learn more about painting, learn more about something. But if you don't, you're not growing. And then you become stagnant, and then you become boring. So reinvent yourself before it's too late for the age of maturity, which is going to last 30 years. And your pension, unless you're very lucky, won't be adequate. So some of that work will have to bring in some money, which is actually very good for you, because you continue to feel that you're worth something. And finally, you will compose yourself into a portfolio person. Now, my portfolio, this is my word, this portfolio means a collection of different sorts of work. Now, it doesn't have to be actually paid work. It can be paid work, but it can be gift work in the community. It can be what I call homework, helping out in the house, looking after kids or grandchildren or whatever. And it can be study work, which is the learning. It can even be fun work. Things you do for fun, but it has to be work. I mean, if you're going to do gardening, for God's sake, do it seriously. But otherwise, you won't find it very satisfying. If you're going to play golf, play it well. Work at it, train at it, learn it, do it properly. So you've got to have work. You've got to have relationships. And you've got to go on learning. And just right at the end, you can be a philosopher. Now, one of my bits of philosophy that I was very keen on was the concept of enough. That if you can't decide what enough is in life, particularly financially, you're never free. You'll always want more and more and more and more. So to be free, you have to work out what enough is. And then life is exciting. The only problem was, I discovered that it was nothing new about that. It was first said in these words in the Tower of China in 500 BC or so. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. And when you realize there's nothing lacking, then the whole world belongs to you. Hopefully, that is your philosophy of the age of maturity. When you've done it all, ambition is spent. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. You can be wholly you. You can be satisfied with what you've got. And the whole world will belong